No one looked twice at the beggar slumped against the alley wall. He was filthy, soaked through from 3 days of cold rain, his cloak so caked in mud it looked like part of the stones beneath him. People stepped around him. Some spat near his feet. A merchant kicked dirt at his legs and laughed. Then a thin hand reached down and pressed something warm into his palm. Sira was 19 years old, a baker's daughter whose father had died owing a debt she could not pay. She had 1 silver coin left in the entire world. 1 coin between her and the workhouse. She had been saving it for bread, for the long walk to the next village, for anything that might keep her alive another week. She gave it to him anyway. Because his lips were blue, because his hands were shaking, because she knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. And then a war horse came thundering down the street. The rider, a man in black armor with a silver wolf stitched across his chest, took one look at the beggar's face and went white. He threw himself off the saddle. He dropped to one knee in the mud. His voice cracked when he spoke the name. Word moved through the city like fire on dry straw. Sira had not just helped some forgotten drunk freezing in a gutter. She had given her last coin to Frederick of House Varen, the wealthiest alpha in the realm, the wolf lord whose lands stretched from the Silver Mountains to the Eastern Sea, the man whose name was whispered with fear in every great hall from here to the capital. And he had been searching the slums for a reason, no one yet understood. Now he is rising to his feet. Now he is looking at her like she is the only person in the world. And no one, not the king, not his enemies, not Sira herself, knows what an alpha like Frederick does when a poor girl is the first soul in 20 years to show him kindness without knowing who he was. The rain had been falling since dawn. Sira pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and bent into the wind, the hem of her dress dragging through puddles the color of weak tea. The market square was almost empty. Most of the stalls had packed up early, hauling their goods under canvas to wait out the storm. Only the desperate were still out, and Sira counted herself among them. 3 days. 3 days until the landlord came back for the rent her father had not lived long enough to pay. 3 days until they took the bakery, the ovens, the little room above it where she had slept her whole life. She had 1 silver coin in the pocket of her apron. She kept her hand pressed against it as she walked, terrified it might fall through some hole she had not noticed. "Move, girl." A merchant pushed past her, shoulders heavy with bolts of wet cloth. She stumbled, caught herself against the wall, and that was when she saw him. He was sitting in the mouth of an alley between the cooper's shop and the tannery. His knees were drawn up to his chest. His head was bowed. His cloak, what was left of it, was so filthy it looked like a pile of rags someone had thrown out and forgotten. A few coppers lay in the mud near his boots, but the rain had washed most of them into the gutter. People walked past him as if he were not there. A boy threw an apple core at his head. The beggar did not flinch. He did not move at all. Sira should have kept walking. She knew she should have kept walking. 1 silver coin, 3 days, a landlord with a face like a hatchet. These things did not leave room for kindness. But then the man lifted his head, and she saw his face. His lips were blue. There was a cut above his eyebrow, dried black. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they were looking at nothing, the way her father's had looked in the last hour before he died. She knew that look. She had seen it in her own reflection more times than she wanted to count. Sira crossed the muddy street before she let herself think about it. "Sir," she said softly, kneeling in front of him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes drifted toward her, slow and unfocused. "You can't stay here," she said. "You'll catch the lung fever in this rain. There's an old stable 2 streets over. The owner died last winter. No one goes there, it's dry." His mouth moved, no sound came out. She bit the inside of her cheek. Then she pulled her hand out of her apron pocket, opened her fingers, and pressed the silver coin into his palm. "Buy yourself bread," she whispered, "and something hot. There's a woman who sells stew at the south gate. She'll give you a bowl for a copper so you'll have plenty left." His fingers closed around the coin. They were cold, So cold she winced. Why, he rasped. His voice was barely a voice at all. She did not have an answer, or she had too many answers and none of them fit into words. She just shook her head and tried to smile. Because you needed it more than I did, she said. She started to stand. He caught her wrist. His grip was weak, but his eyes had cleared just a little and he was looking at her now, really looking. Your name, he whispered. Sierra of the bakery on Mill Lane. She gently pulled her wrist free. Get yourself dry, sir, please. She walked away before she could change her mind. She did not look back. She made it 3 streets before her stomach started to clench, before the cold reality of what she had just done began to crawl up her spine. She had given away her last coin. To a stranger she did not know, who might spend it on wine, who might be dead by morning anyway. She pressed her forehead against a wet brick wall and made herself breathe. It was done. There was no taking it back. She would think of something. She always thought of something. That was when she heard the hooves. It was a sound that did not belong on the cobbles of Mill Lane. The street was too narrow for a war horse. The whole quarter was too poor for one. But there it came, slow and heavy. The rider crouched low against the rain. Sierra flattened herself against the wall as he passed. The horse was enormous, black as pitch, its breath steaming in the cold air. The rider wore black armor, and across his chest, stitched in thread that caught even the gray light, was a silver wolf. She knew that crest. Every child in the kingdom knew that crest. House Varen. The rider did not see her. He was scanning the alleys, his head turning slow and methodical. When he reached the mouth of the alley where she had left the beggar, he stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he was off his horse, not dismounting, throwing himself off, armor and all, landing in the mud and not caring. He went to one knee in front of the man in rags. Sierra's heart climbed into her throat. The rider's voice, when it came, carried down the street even through the rain. My lord, he said, and the word cracked in half. My lord, we have been searching for you for 3 days. The beggar lifted his head. His eyes were no longer empty. They were sharp now, sharp as broken glass, and they were looking past the kneeling soldier, looking down the street, looking for her. Sierra turned and ran. She did not know why she was running. She had done nothing wrong. She had given a coin to a man who needed it. That was all. That was all. But she had seen the way he looked at her, and something in her bones was screaming that her life had just changed, and she did not yet know whether the change was a blessing or a sentence. She ran until her lungs burned, and she did not stop until she was home. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the cold oven in her father's bakery and watched the rain run down the windows, and she told herself over and over that whatever was coming would pass her by. She was no one. She had nothing they could want. She was wrong. By dawn, there were soldiers at her door. The pounding shook the whole front wall. Sierra was on her feet before her mind had finished waking, her father's old kitchen knife in her hand. The bakery was dim, the air still smelling faintly of yesterday's bread, and through the cracked shutters she could see torchlight even though the sun was already up. Open in the name of House Varen. The voice was not the rider's from yesterday. It was older, harder. Sierra set the knife down on the flour barrel. A knife would not help her. Nothing would help her. She opened the door. 3 men stood on her step. 2 were soldiers in the same black armor she had seen in the rain. The third was a thin, gray-haired man in a long traveling cloak, with the careful, watchful face of someone who did not waste his words. He looked her up and down, not unkindly, but thoroughly, the way a buyer at the market looks at a horse he is thinking of bidding on. Sierra of Mill Lane, he asked. Yes. My name is Meister Corvin. I serve House Varen. My lord requests the favor of your presence at the keep. She swallowed, requests. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Requests, my lady. He was very particular about the word. I am not a lady. That, the Meister said, is for him to decide. May we come in while you gather your things?" She let them in because she did not know what else to do. The two soldiers stayed by the door. The Meister walked through her little bakery with his hands folded behind his back, looking at the cold ovens, the empty shelves, the patched curtain that hung between the front room and the stairs. "Your father was a baker." "Yes. He died. A fever 2 months ago. And you have been keeping the shop alone." "Trying to." He turned. His eyes were kinder than she had expected. "You owe a debt, I am told, to a man named Hask." She went still. "How do you know that?" "My lord asked." We answered. "The debt has been paid. The deed to this building is now in your name, free and clear. There is also a sum of 200 gold dragons placed with the merchant guild in your name, which you may collect at your leisure." Sira sat down. Her legs simply gave out and she sat down on the flour barrel, and the knife she had set there earlier clattered onto the floor. 200 gold dragons, yes. For 1 silver coin. For kindness, the Meister said quietly, shown to a man who has not been shown any in some time. She stared at him. Her mouth was open. She could not seem to close it. "My lord wishes to thank you in person," Meister Corvin went on. "He is, at present, recovering. He asks that you come to the keep as his guest for a fortnight. After that, you are free to return here or to go wherever you wish with whatever sum you require. He does not command. He requests. And if I say no, then we will leave, and you will not be troubled again." She believed him. She did not know why, but she did. She thought of the cold oven, the empty shelves, the way the rain had soaked through the patched roof last night and dripped onto her father's old bed. She thought of the man in the alley, the storm cloud eyes, the voice that had cracked when he asked her name. "Give me 10 minutes," she said. The keep of House Varen was 3 days' ride to the north. She had never been outside her city. She had never sat in a carriage. She had never owned a cloak that was not a hand-me-down, and the one Meister Corvin handed her was lined with fur, soft and gray, and warmer than any blanket she had slept under in her life. She rode in the carriage with the Meister. The two soldiers rode alongside. The roads grew wilder as they climbed north. The forests grew darker. By the second day, she could see mountains in the distance, blue and white and impossibly tall. "Tell me about him," she said, on the second evening when they had stopped at a wayhouse and the Meister was warming his hands at the fire. He looked at her over his cup of wine. "Lord Frederick of House Varen," he said, 28 years old, alpha of the Silver Wolf bloodline, the oldest in the realm. His lands run from the Spine of Hale in the west to the Bay of Morrow in the east. He inherited the title at 16 when his father was killed in the border wars. He has held it alone ever since. Alone. His mother died when he was a child. He has no brothers, no sisters, no wife. Why was he in the city dressed like a beggar? The Meister was quiet for a moment. "That," he said, "is his story to tell, not mine. I will say only this, my lady. He has been hunted of late. There are men in the realm who would prefer that House Varen fall, and he came south alone in disguise to learn the truth of a thing he could not trust to messengers. He was set upon. He was wounded. He lost his horse and his purse and his way, and by the time you found him, he had not eaten in 3 days. Sira looked into her own cup. "Why me?" she asked. "Surely someone else would have helped him eventually." The Meister smiled, very faintly. "My lady," he said, "no one else did." The keep rose out of the mountains on the 4th morning. It was not what she had pictured. She had pictured a castle, all towers and banners, the kind of place she had heard about in songs. The seat of House Varen was something older than that, something carved out of the mountain itself, gray stone and slate roofs and a great gate of black iron that opened as their carriage approached. There were wolves on the walls. Real ones, gray and silver and white, watching the road with eyes that glowed faintly in the morning mist. Sira's hands tightened in her lap. "Do not be afraid of them," the Meister said gently. "They are his kin. They will not harm a guest." The carriage rolled into a courtyard of polished stone. Servants in black and silver waited in a neat line. The doors of the great hall opened, and he came down the steps. She did not recognize him at first. He was clean-shaven now. His hair was dark, swept back from his face, and he wore black, not rags. A high collar, a silver wolf clasp at his throat. He moved like a man who had been sick and was forcing himself to walk anyway, and there was a faint pallor under his skin that told her the fever the Meister had spoken of was not entirely gone. But the eyes were the same. Storm cloud gray, sharp as broken glass, and they fixed on her the moment she stepped down from the carriage and did not move. She remembered to curtsy. She remembered too late. He was already in front of her, taking her hand, and his hand was warm now and steady. "Sira of Mill Lane," he said. His voice had come back to him. It was deep, quiet, with the kind of weight that did not need to be loud. "My lord." "Frederick," he corrected, "when we are alone, or when no one is listening too closely." A faint heat crept up her neck. "I owe you my life," he said. "I do not know yet how I am going to repay that, but you will be safe here. You have my word." He bowed over her hand. He kissed her knuckles. And somewhere in her chest, something turned over that she could not name. The first night at the keep, Sira could not sleep. The room they had given her was bigger than the entire upstairs of the bakery. There was a fire burning in a stone hearth, a bed with curtains, a wash basin of beaten silver, a window that looked out over a black valley spotted with the pale shapes of moving wolves. She had eaten more in one meal than she usually ate in a week, and the wine they had poured for her had been so smooth she had not realized how strong it was until she stood up and the floor tilted. She lay in the strange, soft bed and stared at the canopy, and she thought, "I do not belong here. They are going to realize it. Any moment now they are going to realize it, and they will send me back." A wolf howled far down the valley. Another answered. She pulled the covers up to her chin. In the morning, a young woman came to dress her. Her name was Myra, and she was perhaps a year or two younger than Sira, with quick hands and a quicker tongue. She unpacked a wardrobe of gowns Sira had not packed and did not own, in colors Sira had never worn: deep blue, soft gray, a green the color of moss. "My lord had them sent up from the city," Myra said cheerfully, lacing Sira into the gray one. "He guessed at the size. He guessed well, my lady." "I am not a lady, Myra." "As you say, my lady." Sira sighed. Breakfast was in a small hall off the main one, with a long table set for two. Frederick was already there when she arrived, standing by the window with a cup of something steaming in his hand. He turned when she entered, and the look that crossed his face was so brief that she almost missed it, a flicker of something like surprise, like wonder, gone almost before it was there. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, my lord." He raised an eyebrow. "Frederick," she corrected, and watched his mouth lift at the corner. They ate. He asked her about the bakery, about her father, about the city she had grown up in. He listened, really listened, the way she had not been listened to since her father had died, and she found herself talking more than she had meant to. About the bread, about the customers, about the woman at the south gate who sold stew for a copper a bowl. "You sent a stranger to her," Frederick said. "I sent you to her. And had I gone, she would have had her copper, and I would have had my stew, and I would have lived. You did not know that. You sent a stranger to a stranger and trusted both." She looked down at her plate. "I did not think about it that way." "I know," he said. "That is what makes it remarkable." She did not know what to say to that, so she ate another piece of bread and tried not to look at him. After breakfast, he took her to see the wolves. There was a long, low building set against the eastern wall of the keep, half stone and half open air, and inside were perhaps 20 of them, lounging on flat rocks. Drinking from a stream that had been diverted through the floor, they lifted their heads when Frederick came in. One of them, an enormous silver male, padded over and pressed his head against Frederick's hand. "This is Vale," Frederick said. He was my father's. He is older than I am. Sira stayed by the door. You may come closer if you wish. I do not wish. He laughed. It was a real laugh, and it surprised her. It surprised him too, she thought. He looked for a moment like a man who had not laughed in a long time and had forgotten how the muscles in his face worked. They will not harm you, Sira. Forgive me if I prefer to take that on faith from a distance. He smiled. The wolf veil regarded her with calm yellow eyes. They can sense fear, Frederick said, but they can also sense intent. They know you mean no harm, that is enough. You speak as if they understand you. They do. She looked at him sharply. He was scratching the great wolf behind the ear, his face calm. You are not, are you saying? I am Alpha, Sira. The blood of House Varen runs back 1,000 years. We are not only men. Some of us are also wolves when we choose to be. She stared at him. You can change shape. Yes. Into one of these. Yes. The silver wolf, Veil, yawned. His teeth were as long as her fingers. I think, Sira said carefully, I would like to sit down. He brought her to a stone bench just outside the wolf hall. The morning sun was warm on her face. She breathed. I should have told you yesterday, he said, but you had only just arrived. I did not want to frighten you. I am not frightened. You are a little frightened. I am a little frightened, she admitted. Are you going to change in front of me? Not unless you ask me to. I am not asking you to. Then I will not. She looked at her hands. They were not shaking. That was something. Why are you telling me this? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Because, he said finally, I do not want you to find out from someone else. And you will if you stay here even for a fortnight. The keep is full of my kin, and they will not all hide what they are. And after the fortnight, he looked at her. His eyes were very gray in the morning light. After the fortnight, he said, I hope you will choose to stay longer, but that is your choice, Sira. It will always be your choice. Footsteps interrupted them. A man was coming up the path, tall and golden-haired, dressed in riding leathers, with a smile already on his face. He stopped when he saw Sira. The smile did not falter exactly, but it changed. Brother, he said, you did not tell me we had a guest. Sira turned to Frederick, brother. Frederick's jaw had tightened. Sira, he said, his voice carefully level. May I present my cousin, Lord Castor of House Varen. Castor, this is Sira of Mill Lane. She is the woman who saved my life. Castor's eyes moved over her, slow and considering. He smiled wider. Is she, he said, how fortunate for all of us. He bowed. He took her hand and kissed it, and the kiss was a moment too long. She did not like him. She did not know why. She felt it the way an animal feels a change in the weather before the storm has even shown itself, and she did not like him at all. Frederick stood, putting himself very slightly between them. Castor was just leaving, he said. Was I? You were. The two men looked at each other. A whole conversation passed between them that Sira could not read. Then Castor laughed, soft and easy, and stepped back. Of course, he said. Forgive me, Lady Sira. I am sure we will speak again soon. He walked away down the path, whistling. The wolves in the hall behind them did not lift their heads. Sira looked at Frederick. His face had gone very still. You do not like him, she said. He is my cousin. That is not what I asked. A muscle moved in his jaw. No, Frederick said quietly. I do not like him, and neither, I think, will you. But he is family, Sira, and family in this house is not a thing one can simply set aside. The wolves in the hall began, very softly, to growl. The fortnight passed too quickly. Sira meant to stay aloof. She meant to keep her head down, eat her meals, count her days, and ride back to the city with her purse full and her heart untouched. She had not lived 19 years on the edge of nothing without learning how to keep her hopes small. It did not work. Frederick came to her room every morning. He did not knock and enter, he knocked and waited at the door, and when she opened it, he asked if she would walk with him. The first day, she said yes because she did not know how to say no to a man who had just paid her father's debt. The second day, she said yes because the gardens were beautiful. By the fourth day, she was up before the sun, dressed and ready, listening for his step in the hall. He showed her the keep, the library 3 stories tall with books in languages she had never seen, the armory where the swords hung in rows that stretched back into shadow, the high terrace where you could see the whole valley laid out below, the river silver in the morning light. He showed her the kitchens, too, and that was the day she made him laugh again. "You hold a knife wrong," she said, watching him try to peel an apple for her. "I hold a knife perfectly well. For killing, perhaps, not for fruit." She took the knife from him. She peeled the apple in one long, unbroken spiral, the way her father had taught her, and handed it back to him with the peel curled around her wrist like a green ribbon. He stared at the apple, then at her. Then he laughed, and the cooks in the kitchen all looked up at the sound, and one old woman who was kneading bread crossed herself. "What?" Sira asked when he had stopped laughing. "Nothing. Tell me." He looked at her. The laugh was fading from his eyes, but something else was taking its place, and she did not know the name for it, but she felt it down to the soles of her feet. "It is only," he said, "that I do not remember the last time I laughed in this kitchen, or anywhere in this keep. I was beginning to think I had forgotten how." She did not know what to say to that, so she handed him the apple and pretended to be very interested in a sack of flour. The trouble began on the 7th day. Castor came to dinner. He had been, Frederick told her in a low voice as they walked to the great hall, away on his own lands to the south. He was returning earlier than expected. He would be sitting at the high table with them tonight, and probably for the rest of her stay, and Frederick was sorry for it. "Why are you sorry?" "You will see." She did see. Castor was charming. He was charming the way a knife is sharp, deliberately, with a purpose, and you did not realize you had been cut until you saw the blood. He sat across from her and asked her about the bakery, but his questions were not Frederick's questions. They were small and careful and pointed, designed to remind her gently that she had been a baker's daughter and was now sitting at the high table of the most powerful house in the realm. "Tell me, Lady Sira," he said, swirling wine in his cup, "have you ever been to court?" "No, my lord." "Ah, you will love it, or perhaps you will hate it. They are not always kind at court to those they consider." He paused. He smiled. "Newcomers." "I am not going to court," Sira said. "No," Castor glanced at Frederick. "You should bring her, cousin. She would be a sensation. They have not seen anything like her in a long while." "Sira goes where she wishes," Frederick said quietly, "not where I bring her." "Of course," Castor lifted his cup. "Of course." He let it lie for about a quarter of an hour. Then he tried again, from a different angle, and then again, and again, each remark a little less kind than the one before, each one wrapped so carefully in courtesy that Sira could not have called it an insult without sounding like a fool. By the end of dinner, her hands were shaking under the table. She went to bed early. She did not sleep. In the morning, when Frederick knocked, she did not open the door. He knocked again. "Sira," he said through the wood, "please." She opened the door. She had been crying and she had wiped her face, but he could see it anyway. His jaw went tight. "What did he say to you?" he said. It was not a question. Nothing he did not have the right to say. "He has no rights in this house. I do not give him." "He is your cousin, Frederick." "I know what he is." She looked up at him. He was standing in the corridor, fully dressed, his hand still raised from the knock. There were shadows under his eyes. He had not slept either, she thought. "Walk with me," he said. She walked with him. He did not take her to the gardens. He took her up a stone staircase she had not yet climbed, past the library, past the armory. Up and up until they came out on a high stone walk above the keep, with the wind cold and sharp, and the whole valley spread beneath them. He stopped at the edge. He did not look at her. Castor was meant to be alpha, he said. She blinked. His father was my father's older brother. By rights, the title should have passed through that line. But his father died young and Castor was a child, and our grandfather chose my father instead. When my father died, the title came to me. He resents you. He has resented me my whole life. He is careful about it. He has never moved openly. But the men who hunted me 3 weeks ago, the men who left me bleeding in that alley, Sierra, they did not find me by accident. She went cold. You think Castor sent them? I cannot prove it, not yet. If I could, this conversation would be a very different one. Then why is he in your house? He turned. The wind moved his dark hair back from his face. His eyes were the color of the sky behind him. Because if I send him away without proof, he said, the other houses will say I moved against my own blood out of fear and they will choose his side. Because if I keep him close, I can watch him. Because every day I do not act, I learn a little more about who else stands with him. He paused. And because I am tired, Sierra, I have been alone in this for a long time. She did not think before she did it. She reached up and put her hand against his cheek. He went very, very still. I am sorry, he said after a long moment. I should not have brought you into this. You did not bring me, I came. You came because I asked. I came, she said, because I wanted to. His hand came up and covered hers. His skin was warm. She could feel the faint roughness of stubble under her palm, and the shape of his jaw, and the way his breath caught when she did not pull away. Sierra. Yes. Tell me to step back. No. He bent his head. He did not kiss her, not yet. He pressed his forehead against hers, and they stood like that, the wind tearing at their cloaks, and she could feel his heartbeat through the place where her wrist rested against his throat. I have wanted you, he said, very quietly, since the moment I lifted my head in that alley and saw your face. You did not even know me. No, I knew enough. He kissed her then. It was soft, careful, like he was afraid she might break, and she leaned into him and felt every cold and frightened thing in her chest go quiet at once. When he drew back, his eyes were not gray anymore. They were gold. She stared. I am sorry, he said, and his voice had gone rough. I cannot always control it when. Do not, she said, apologize to me, not for that. He laughed, low and shaken, and pressed his forehead to hers again. Down in the courtyard far below, a horn was blowing. Riders were coming through the gate. Sierra leaned out, her hand still in Frederick's, and saw a long line of them, banners snapping in the wind, black and gold, a serpent on the field. Frederick's face changed. Who is it? She asked. The king's men. The king sent them. No, Frederick said quietly. Castor did. That is the seal of his mother's house. They are his riders. He has called his bannermen to my keep. Why? He looked at her. The gold had not yet faded from his eyes. Because, he said, he knows. The hall that night was full of strangers. Castor's men filled the lower tables, 50 of them at least, in black leather and gold-stitched cloaks, eating Frederick's food and drinking Frederick's wine and laughing too loud in a hall that had been quiet for years. At the high table, Castor sat at Frederick's right hand, where Sierra had been sitting only the night before. Sierra had been moved further down. She had not asked to be moved. She had simply walked into the hall and found her place taken and a servant gesturing her to a seat 3 chairs along. She had not made a scene. She had sat down. Frederick had not looked at her once during the meal. She knew why. She still felt it like a small, cold stone in her chest every time his gaze passed over her and did not stop. Castor was talking. He had been talking all evening. And so, he was saying, lifting his cup, I told my mother's bannermen, come north, come and meet my cousin's new guest, the woman who has charmed the wolf of the Varens out of his own black mood. She is a wonder, I told them, a baker's daughter, a real one. Imagine it. The men at the lower tables laughed. Sierra kept her eyes on her plate. Tell me, Lady Sira, Castor went on, turning toward her with a smile that did not reach any part of his face above the mouth. Did you ever, when you were kneading your bread, imagine that one day you would dine with the high lords of the realm? No, my lord. No, a failure of imagination, then. More laughter. Castor, Frederick said. His voice was very quiet. Cousin, enough. I am only making conversation. I said enough. The hall went still. Castor lifted his cup. He was still smiling. Forgive me, he said lightly. I had not realized the lady was so delicate. I shall not tease her again. He drank. He set the cup down. He did not look at Frederick. He looked at Sira, and his eyes were no longer smiling at all, and she understood then what he had been doing all night, and what he was going to keep doing until one of two things happened. Either Frederick pushed him too far in front of his bannermen, and the hall split into open war. Or Sira left, and Frederick let her go, and Castor had what he wanted, the keep, the kin, the council, his cousin alone again and grieving and easier to break. Either way, she was the lever. She set down her knife. She stood up. Forgive me, my lords, she said. I find I am tired. She walked out of the hall. She did not run. She walked with her head up, the way Myra had taught her to walk, and she did not look at Frederick as she passed him. She made it to her room. She closed the door. She sat down on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands over her mouth. A long time passed. The knock, when it came, was soft. Sira. She opened the door. He was still in his black dinner clothes. The silver wolf clasp was at his throat. His eyes were gray again and tired. May I come in? Yes. He came in. He closed the door. He did not move toward her. I am going to ask you to leave the keep, he said. She did not flinch. She had known it was coming. She had known since she had walked out of the hall. All right. Not because I want you to go. He said it quickly, like the words hurt him. Because I cannot keep you safe here, Sira. Not tonight. Not with his men in my walls. I have arranged for an escort. They will take you south to a holding I trust. You will be safe there, you will be cared for, and as soon as I have ended this, as soon as it is done, I will come for you. I swear it on my blood. Frederick. Please, please do not argue with me. I cannot. Frederick, she crossed the room. She put both her hands on his chest. I am not going to argue with you. He looked down at her. You are not. No. Why not? She could feel his heart under her palms. It was beating hard. Because, she said, I trust you, and because you are right, and because if I stay, he will use me and I will not be the thing that breaks you. His breath went out of him. He pulled her against him. He held her like a man holding something he had only just realized he could lose. I do not deserve you, he said into her hair. Stop. I do not. Frederick, listen to me. She pulled back just enough to look at him. When this is over, when you come for me, you will not find a baker's daughter waiting for you. You will find a woman who has been thinking every single day about what kind of life she wants to build and with whom. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. He kissed her. It was not careful this time. It was hungry and a little desperate, and she kissed him back like she meant it because she did. When he drew back, his eyes were gold again. Tomorrow at dawn, he said, Myra will come for you. The escort will be waiting at the eastern gate. Tell no one, not even her, until you are in the carriage. All right. I love you, Sira. She had not known she was waiting to hear it. But the words went through her like warm water, and her eyes filled, and she nodded against his chest because she did not trust her voice. And I love you, she said when she could. He left before he could change his mind. She saw it on his face. She did not sleep. She watched the fire burn down to embers, and she went over every word he had said, and every word she had said back. And at some point near dawn, she got up and dressed in the warmest of her gray gowns and the fur-lined cloak and waited. Myra came at first light. Myra's eyes were red. My lady, we must hurry. What is it? What has happened? Please. My lady, please come. They ran through corridors, downstairs, out a side door into a courtyard where the carriage was already waiting, and 4 riders in black armor sat their horses with their swords drawn, watching every doorway. The captain dismounted as Sira came out. He did not look like a man going on an escort journey. He looked like a man going to war. My lady. Where is he? Sira said. Where is Lord Frederick? The captain's mouth tightened. My lord went out riding before dawn, my lady. He was alone. He has not returned. Sira went cold. What do you mean he has not returned? His horse came back without him an hour ago. The saddle was bloody. We have men out searching. My lady, he gave me direct orders. If anything was wrong, I was to put you in this carriage and not stop until we reached the holding. He was very specific. No. My lady. No, you listen to me. You take me to where his horse came in, now. My lady, my lord's orders. I do not care, Sira said, and she heard her own voice and did not recognize it. It was the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose. Take me to where his horse came in, or I will walk. The captain looked at her for a long moment. Then he lifted her up onto his own horse. The horse had come in at the eastern gate. The stable boy showed her where, his face white, his hands still red where he had been trying to clean the saddle. The blood was on the pommel, on the stirrup, soaked into the leather in a long dark streak down the right side, the way blood ran when a rider had been struck and had stayed in the saddle for some time before falling. How long ago? Sira asked. Maybe an hour, my lady, maybe a little more. Which way did he ride out? North, my lady, through the high gate toward the river. She turned to the captain. Get Vale, she said. The captain blinked. My lady. The silver wolf, the old one. Frederick's father's wolf, get him. He can find Frederick. He has known him since he was a boy. My lady, Vale is half wild, he does not. Get him. She had never raised her voice at a man with a sword before. He went. Vale came at a long lope, silver in the morning mist, and he stopped in the courtyard and looked at her with yellow eyes that were old and clever and strangely kind. She did not know how to talk to a wolf. She walked up to him anyway. She knelt in the wet stones in her gray gown, and she put her hand on the side of his great heavy head, and she said very quietly, Find him for me. Vale lifted his nose. He turned. He went out of the courtyard at a slow, steady run, his head low to the ground, and the captain put Sira up onto his horse again, and they followed. They followed for an hour, through the high gate, down the river road, off the road into the trees where the ground turned soft and the hoofprints became a churned mess that even Sira could read, 3 horses besides Frederick's, maybe 4, riding hard, riding to catch. Vale stopped at a gully. He stood at the edge and looked down, and he did not move. Sira was off the horse before the captain could help her. She slid down the wet bank with her skirts in both hands, and she found him at the bottom, half in the stream and half out, his black coat dark with wet and darker with something else. Frederick. He did not move. Aldric. She turned him over. There was a cut down the side of his head. There was a deeper cut in his side just under the ribs, and it was still bleeding, slow and steady, the kind of bleeding that did not stop on its own. His face was the color of paper. She pressed her hands against the wound. She pressed hard. She heard distantly the captain shouting orders, men coming down the bank, but it was all far away. Frederick's eyes were closed. His chest was barely moving. You do not get to leave me, she said. She could not hear her own voice. You do not get to leave me. You said you would come for me. You said you would come for me, Frederick, you said. His eyelids fluttered. Sira, he breathed. It was not even a word. It was the shape of a word. I am here. I am right here. He sent. I know who sent them. Be quiet now. Save your breath. Should not have come. Be quiet, Frederick. He smiled. It was a faint, broken thing, but it was a smile. "Bossy," he whispered. Then his eyes closed, and his head went heavy in her lap, and she pressed harder on the wound and started to scream for the captain. They got him back to the keep. Meister Corvin had been waiting at the gate, his face gray. They carried Frederick up to his chambers on a stretcher of cloaks and laid him on his own bed, and Myra closed the door on the corridor full of staring servants, and Corvin began to work. Sira stayed. She held Frederick's hand while Corvin pulled the leathers away from the wound, while he poured strong wine into the cut, and Frederick did not even flinch because he was too far gone to flinch. She held his hand while Corvin stitched, and while he laid herbs on the stitches, and while he bound the whole thing with linen so white it hurt her eyes. When it was done, Corvin sat back. His hands were shaking. "My lady," he said quietly, "I have done what I can. The wound is deep. He has lost a great deal of blood. There is fever already. For a man it would be very bad." "He is not a man." "He is also a man, my lady. The wolf in him will fight for him, but the man in him is tired. He has been tired for years. I do not know which will win." She nodded. She kept holding Frederick's hand. "I will sit with him," she said. "My lady, you have not slept." "I will sit with him, Meister." Corvin bowed his head and left. The fever came in fully by midnight. Frederick began to mutter, low and broken, words she could not always catch. His mother's name, his father's, once very clearly hers. His skin burned. She wrung cloths out in cool water and laid them on his forehead. She made him drink drop by drop when his lips cracked. Myra came in with a tray she did not eat. The captain came in to report. There had been 4 riders. They had been caught at the river crossing. 2 were dead. 2 had been brought back alive. They wore no insignia, but one of them under questioning had said a name. "Castor." "Where is he?" Sira said. She did not look up from Frederick's face. "Locked in the south tower, my lady, with his men disarmed in the courtyard. They did not resist. They did not know." "Good. What would you have us do, my lady?" She looked up then. The captain was a big man with a scar through one eyebrow, and he was looking at her like she was something he did not yet understand, and was waiting too. "Nothing," she said. "Not yet, not until he wakes." "My lady." "He will wake," she said, "and when he does, this is his to answer, not mine. Hold the keep. Hold Castor. Send no word out. We tell the realm nothing until my lord can speak for himself." The captain looked at her for a long moment. Then he bowed, deeper than he had bowed before. "As my lady commands," he said. He left. Sira turned back to the bed. Frederick was muttering again. She caught the edge of her own name. She brushed the damp hair back from his forehead and bent close. "I am here," she whispered. "I am right here. Come back to me, Frederick, come back." She stayed by his bed for 2 days. She did not eat. She slept in the chair by the fire in pieces, an hour here, an hour there. Myra tried to make her go to her own room. Corvin tried. The captain stood in the doorway once with his arms folded and did not move for a long time, and finally went away without speaking. On the 3rd morning, Frederick opened his eyes. They were gray, clear, tired. "Sira," he said. Her face crumpled. She did not cry. She had not cried, not really, through any of it. She just put her head down on the edge of the bed beside his hand, and she breathed, and his hand came up, slow and shaking, and rested on her hair. "I told you," he said softly, "bossy." A laugh tore out of her. It was an awful sound. "I am going to kill you," she said into the blanket. "Someone has tried. I am going to finish it." He stroked her hair. She felt him smile. "Tell me," he said. She lifted her head. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She told him about Vale, about the gully, about the captain bringing her back, about Castor in the South Tower, about the keep holding its breath. He listened. When she was done, he was quiet for a long time. "You did well," he said finally. "I did what had to be done." "You did what a queen does." She went still. He looked at her. His eyes were very clear. I am not asking yet, Sira. Not while I am like this, but you should know that I am going to ask. She did not know what to say. She bent her head and kissed his hand, and she stayed that way until he fell asleep again. Frederick was on his feet in 5 days. He should not have been. Corvin told him so several times with feeling. Frederick listened politely and stood up anyway, and he took his sword down off the wall, and he walked slowly on Sira's arm, down the long stone corridor that led from his chambers to the great hall. The hall had been set up like a court. Castor's bannermen sat at the lower tables. They were unarmed. They had been allowed to keep their dignity, which was Frederick's choice and Sira's, and they knew it. The high table had been moved. In its place stood a single chair, the old black chair of the Alpha with the silver wolf carved into its back, and Frederick sat down in it slowly, his hand pressed against his side. Sira stood at his right shoulder. She was not in gray today. Myra had dressed her in deep blue, the color of the Varan banner, and her hair was up, and her hands were folded in front of her, and she did not look like a baker's daughter at all. The doors opened. Castor was brought in. He had not been beaten. He had not been starved. His clothes were clean. But his hands were tied in front of him, and there were 2 guards at his shoulders, and he walked into that hall a prisoner, and every man in the room knew it. He stopped in front of the chair. He did not bow. "Cousin," he said. "Castor, you look well considering." "I am well considering." Castor's eyes flicked to Sira. He smiled faintly. "And the lady is still here. How loyal of her." "Speak to me, Castor, not to her." "As you like." Castor lifted his bound hands, an elegant gesture even in chains. "Then let me speak plainly. You are going to accuse me. Your men are going to accuse me. I am going to deny it. There is no proof, Frederick. There never was. The men who ambushed you are dead or claim a name I never gave them. You cannot move against me without breaking the alliances of this house in half. So," he shrugged. "What is this for? Theater?" Frederick was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, very slightly, to someone at the back of the hall. The captain came forward. He was carrying a leather satchel. He opened it on the floor in front of the chair. There were letters inside, a great many letters, sealed and unsealed in different hands. He laid them out one by one. "These," Frederick said, "were taken from your chambers in the South Tower while you sat in the cell. You were so confident of your innocence you did not even burn them." Castor's smile thinned. "Letters can be forged." "They can. These were not. Your hand is on them, your seal. Your private seal, Castor, the one your mother gave you when you came of age. You wrote to 3 houses in the South. You wrote to a free company in the East. You wrote, in plain words, of what you would pay a man to find me on the road and make sure I did not return. You did not even have the courtesy to use a cipher." The hall was very quiet. Castor's face had gone the color of old wax. "Your bannermen," Frederick went on, "are not on trial today. They came here on your word, and they came in good faith, and they will be free to ride home before nightfall with their swords returned to them at the gate. You, however, have a choice." Castor swallowed. The motion was visible. "What choice?" "I can have you executed in this hall in front of these men for the attempted murder of your Alpha. That is my right by every law of this house in this realm. Or you can swear on your blood and your bones before these witnesses to leave these lands and never return. You will go to the free cities across the sea. You will not write to any house in this realm again. If you are seen on this side of the water for the rest of your life, you will be killed where you stand. Choose." Castor looked at him. He looked for a long moment at Sira. She did not look away. "Exile," he said very softly. "Say it." "I swear it, on my blood, on my bones. I will leave these lands and never return." "Good," Frederick said. "Take him out." The guards took him out. He did not speak again. As he passed Sira, his eyes lingered on her for a heartbeat, and there was something in them that was not anger and not even hatred. It was a kind of weary recognition. He had played a long game, and he had lost it to a girl who had not even known the board existed when she sat down at it. The doors closed behind him. Frederick let out a breath. He sagged just slightly in the chair. Sira's hand was on his shoulder before she had decided to put it there. "My lord," the captain said. "Captain, the bannermen." Frederick nodded. He pushed himself upright. He looked out at the men in the lower tables, and his voice, when it came, carried. "You came here on a lie," he said. "I know it. You know it now. I do not hold you to it. You will eat at this table tonight as my guests. You will ride home in the morning with my road marks on your saddles, and the question of what stands between your houses and mine will be answered later in the proper places by the proper men. Tonight we eat." A long, slow breath went through the hall. Then one by one the bannermen rose and bowed, to the chair, and after a moment to Sira. She stood very still, and did not let her face show what it wanted to show. Frederick turned his head. His eyes were tired, but they were bright. "Now," he said, low enough that only she could hear, "I am going to ask you." "Frederick." "Not in front of them. Walk with me." He stood with effort. She gave him her arm. They walked out of the hall together through a side door into the small garden Myra had shown her on her second day. There was a stone bench. There was a fountain. There were, in the corner, 3 young wolves curled in a patch of sun, who lifted their heads as Frederick came in and lowered them again when he passed. He sat down on the bench. He did not let go of her hand. "I have nothing to give you," he said, "that you do not already have. The keep is yours if you want it. The lands are yours. My name is yours if you will take it. My life is plainly yours. You held it in your hands a week ago and decided it was worth keeping. I am asking, Sira, if you will keep it for the rest of mine." She looked down at him. The sun was in his hair. His side was bandaged under his coat. He was the most powerful man in the realm, and he was sitting on a bench in a small garden waiting for a baker's daughter to answer him. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes. Yes, Frederick, yes." He laughed. It was the broken, surprised laugh from the kitchen, the one that had made the old cook cross herself, and she sat down beside him on the bench, and he pulled her against his good side and held her there. "There is one more thing," he said after a while. "What?" "The bond, the wolf bond. It is not like a human marriage, Sira. If I take you as my mate in the way of my house, it goes deeper. You will feel what I feel. I will feel what you feel. We will be tied blood to blood until one of us dies. It cannot be undone." She thought about it. She did not think long. "Good," she said. He looked at her. "Good. I do not want it undone. I do not want any part of you that can be set aside. I want all of it, Frederick. The man and the wolf and the lord and the broken thing in the alley, all of it." His eyes had gone gold again. "You should not say that to me yet," he said low. "Why not?" "Because if you do, I will not be able to wait until I am healed to claim you, and I am supposed to be a noble man." A laugh shook out of her. "Be a slightly less noble man," she said, "and kiss me." He did. The young wolves in the corner did not lift their heads. They were married at the keep 3 weeks later. It was not the wedding she had imagined when she was a girl kneading bread on a wooden table. It was not the wedding anyone in the realm had imagined for the wolf lord of House Varen either. There were no foreign princesses in the great hall, no alliances signed in front of priests. There was a baker's daughter in a gown the color of moss, and a tall, pale alpha with his hand bandaged under the cuff of his coat, and Meister Corvin reading the words of the old binding, while the wolves of the keep sat ranged along the walls of the courtyard, silver and gray and white, watching with eyes that caught the torchlight. When Corvin was done, Frederick took Sira's wrist. He did not do it in front of the hall. He did it later, in the chamber that was now hers as well as his, with the door closed and the fire low. "Are you sure?" he said. "I am sure. It will hurt. I am sure, Frederick." He brought her wrist to his mouth. His eyes were gold. His teeth were not human teeth anymore, not entirely, and she felt them break the skin and she did gasp, but it was not pain exactly that made her gasp. It was the shift, like a string had been tied between her chest and his and pulled tight, and now she could feel him on the other end of it. His fear and his love and his fear-surprised joy, all of it, pouring across the line. He drew back. He licked the small wound. It closed under his tongue and left two pale marks like the imprint of his teeth, and she knew without being told that they would never fully fade. "Your turn," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Where?" He bared his shoulder. The old scar from the gully was a long pink line down his side, still healing. "Anywhere," he said, "wherever you want." She bit him over his heart. He made a sound that was not quite human. The bond went from a string to a rope, and she could feel it, gold inside her, anchored to the place where her teeth had been, and she pulled back and he caught her face in both his hands and kissed her like a man drowning. Later, much later, she lay against his shoulder in the dark. The fire was almost out. The wolves were quiet in the valley. She could feel his heartbeat through her cheek and through the bond at the same time twice, and it should have been strange, and instead it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "Frederick." "Hello." "Your father's brother, Castor's father. How did he die?" She felt his stillness through the bond before she felt it in his body. "In the border wars," he said after a long moment. "The same wars that killed my father." "Both of them in the same wars?" "Yes." "Frederick." "I know," he said quietly. "I have wondered. For years I have wondered. There is no proof, Sira. Whoever moved against my house, they moved a long time ago and they covered their tracks well. Castor is a tool. He was always a tool. The hand that wielded him is older than he is, and it is still out there." She lay very still. "How do we find it?" she asked. He turned his head. He looked at her in the low red light of the embers. "We," he said. "W.E. Frederick." His mouth turned up at the corner, slowly. "I knew I was marrying a queen," he said. "You said that before." "I keep being right." She hit him gently on the chest. The first letter came the next morning. It was waiting on the breakfast tray. A small folded square, sealed with red wax, no sigil pressed into the wax at all. Myra said a rider had brought it to the gate at dawn and ridden away without speaking. Sira unfolded it. There were 3 words inside. "Congratulations, little Beggar." She handed it to Frederick without speaking. He read it. His face did not change, but the bond did. She felt the cold flicker of his anger, and under it, something quieter and harder, like a man recognizing a familiar face in a crowd. "Whoever it is," he said, "they were watching. They knew of the wedding before the realm did. It could be Castor, from across the sea. It could, it is not." "How do you know?" He folded the letter again. He set it on the tray. "Because Castor would have signed it," he said. "He always signed everything. It was his vanity. Whoever this is not him. This is what was using him." She felt the cold of it settle in her own chest. "Frederick." "I know. What do we do?" He looked at her across the breakfast table. His eyes were clear gray. She could feel through the bond exactly how much he did not want to say what he was about to say. "We go to the capital," he said. She had never been to the capital. She had grown up hearing of it the way children hear of stories, the great white walls, the river that ran through the city like a silver ribbon, the king's palace with its 100 towers. She had never thought she would see it. She had certainly never thought she would see it as the wife of an alpha lord, riding in a carriage through the high gate with 100 household guards around her, and the Varan banner snapping above the carriage roof. She gripped Frederick's hand all the way through the gate. "Breathe," he said, without looking at her. "I am breathing." "You are not." "Frederick, there are people." There were. The streets were lined with them. Word had moved ahead of them of the wolf lord and his low-born bride, of the cousin who had been exiled, of the wedding in the keep with no kings invited. People had come to look. They were not all friendly. She could see it in some of the faces, the narrow looks, the whispers behind hands. She lifted her chin. She had walked past worse on Mill Lane in the rain. The palace, when they reached it, was as big as a town. It had its own walls, its own gates, its own gardens half a league long. They were brought through 3 sets of doors and up a great curving stair and into a small receiving hall, and a steward with a face like a closed door told them the king would receive them tomorrow, and tonight they would rest as the king's guests. Frederick thanked him politely. The moment the steward was gone, Frederick pulled Sira close. He did not speak. He did not need to. Through the bond she could feel him scanning the room, the doors, the windows, the small sounds of servants moving in the next chamber. "It is too quiet," he said, very softly into her hair. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that the hand that has been moving against my house may be closer than I thought." She drew back, she looked up at him. "In the palace. In the palace." The bond between them went very still and very alert, like a wolf hearing a twig snap in the dark. That night, neither of them slept much. In the morning, the king sent for them. The king was an old man. That was the first thing Sira noticed. She had not expected it. In her head, all kings were tall and broad and crowned with gold. King Havar of the realm was tall, yes, but bent, his hair white, his hands spotted with age. He sat on a throne of old dark wood, and he watched Frederick and Sira walk the long carpet toward him with eyes that were the color of weak tea. "Lord Frederick," he said. His voice was thinner than she had pictured. "Your Grace. I had heard you were dead twice. Reports were premature, Your Grace." A faint, dry sound that might have been a laugh. "And this," the king said, "is the lady wife I have heard so much about." Sira curtsied as Myra had taught her, low, steady, not too long. "Your Grace." "Stand up, child, let me see you." She stood up. The king looked at her for a long time. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. "I have been told that, Your Grace. They said you were a baker's daughter." "I am, Your Grace." His eyes moved back to Frederick. "Your house has been quiet of late, Lord Frederick, quieter than I would like." "I have been occupied, Your Grace. With this baker's daughter. With matters of my own house. Your cousin Castor has chosen to take his leave of these lands, Your Grace, with my full consent." A small silence. "Has he?" "He has." "That is interesting." The king's eyes had not moved from Frederick's face. Sira, standing beside her husband, felt the bond stir between them. Frederick was reading something in the old man's face that she could not. She concentrated. She let the bond carry it to her. And what came back was not a thought exactly, but a feeling, a sharp, very old, very tired suspicion, like a man who has finally seen the face of an enemy he has been chasing for a long time and is only now sure of it. "Your Grace," Frederick said carefully, "I came south at your summons. I would be glad to know what business required my presence." "In a moment, Lord Frederick, in a moment." The king lifted one thin hand. "First, an introduction. There is a man in this court who has wished to meet you for some time, my Lord Hand. Step forward if you would." A figure moved out of the shadow at the king's left. Sira had not seen him standing there. He had been so still that her eyes had passed over him as part of the wall. He was tall, very tall, dressed in dark robes with a chain of office on his chest. He was old, but not as old as the king. His hair was iron gray. His face was thin, clever, smooth, and entirely calm. He walked forward into the light. "My lord," he said with a small bow, "I am Lord Vortigern, the king's hand. I am honored at last to meet the Alpha of House Varen." Frederick had gone very, very still. Sira felt it like a stone dropped into a deep well. Through the bond came something she had not felt from him before, not fear. Recognition, mixed with a fury so cold and so old it took her breath. "Vortigern," Frederick said quietly. "My lord." "I knew your name. I did not know your face." "Few do. I prefer it that way." Frederick turned his head. He looked very briefly at the old king on the throne. The king was looking back at him, and Sira understood in one bright awful flash that the king knew what Vortigern was, had known perhaps for a long time, had not had the proof or the strength or the courage to move against him alone, had been waiting for someone to come who could. Waiting for the wolf. "Your Grace," Frederick said, his voice perfectly level, "I would beg your indulgence for a question." "Granted." "My father died in the border wars 16 years ago. My uncle, Lord Castor's father, died in the same campaign. The reports at the time named a free company called the Black Reaches as responsible for the ambush that killed them." "Yes," the king said softly, "I remember." "The Black Reaches were paid by a man whose face was never seen. The gold passed through 3 hands. The trail was lost in the south." "It was." "My lord Hand," Frederick said, turning slightly. His voice did not change. "Where were you 16 years ago?" Vortigern smiled. It was a very small smile. "In the south, my lord," he said, "serving a different master." "Was that master named?" "I never knew his name, my lord. I was a young man then. I did as I was told." "Of course." The two men looked at each other. Sira could feel her husband through the bond like a banked fire, and she could feel that he was not going to draw a sword in this hall. Not today. Not in front of the king who had given him this gift, this introduction, this confirmation. Not without proof an entire realm could see. "It is good to have met you, my lord Hand," Frederick said. "And you, my lord Varon. I think we will meet again." "I am sure of it." The king cleared his throat. The sound was thin and dry. "Lord Frederick, I summoned you because there is unrest on the eastern border. I would have your counsel. We will speak of it at length tomorrow. For tonight, you and your lady are my guests. Rest, eat, be welcome." "Your Grace." They bowed. They turned. They walked out of the throne room the long way, past the eyes of every courtier in the hall, and Sira kept her hand on Frederick's arm and her face perfectly still, because she could feel through the bond that her husband was a hair's breadth from shifting, right there, in the king's hall. He did not. They did not speak until they were back in their chambers. He locked the door himself. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands, and through the bond she felt him shake. She knelt in front of him. She put her hands on his knees. "Frederick." It was him, Sira. It was him, all of it, my father, my uncle, the men in the alley. Castor was his pawn from the beginning. Castor never knew. 16 years. 16 years he has sat at the king's right hand and reached his hand into my house and broken what he could of it, and I was a child when he started. I was a child. "I know." "The king knows. Did you see his face? The king knows. And he is too old now and too weak to move alone, and he gave him to me, Sarah. He gave him to me as a gift." "I know." She pulled his hands away from his face. His eyes were gold and wet. "Frederick, listen to me. We are going to end this. You said it yourself. You are not alone in this house anymore. Do you understand me? He has had 16 years. We have the rest of our lives." He looked at her. The gold in his eyes burned, and then steadied. "Yes," he said. "Say it." "Yes, Sira." She kissed him. It was not soft. He pulled her up onto his lap and they held each other, and the bond between them gathered itself like something coiling for a strike. That night, lying in the dark with his arm heavy across her, she stared up at the canopy and made a list, the way she used to make lists of bread orders in the bakery. What they knew. What they did not. What they would need. Allies, proof. Time. The other great houses, the ones who had lost fathers and brothers in those same border wars, who had grieved and gone home and never known why. The bannermen of Castor's mother's line, who had been let go in good faith at the keep, those men were a debt, and debts could be called. The realm was full of houses who had been hurt by Vortigern's hand, and did not know it. We will tell them, Sira thought. We will tell them, and they will come. She closed her eyes. Frederick, half asleep, tightened his arm around her. What are you thinking? He murmured, through the bond as much as through the air. I am thinking, she said, that I gave a coin to a beggar in an alley, and now I am going to help my husband bring down the second most powerful man in the realm. He laughed. It was sleepy and warm, and it shook the bed. The coin was a good investment, he said. Go to sleep, Frederick. He did. She did not for a long time. She lay awake and watched the firelight move on the canopy, and she planned. They left the capital 3 days later. They did not leave alone. 3 of the great houses rode out with them, lords whose fathers had died in the same wars as Frederick's father, lords who had sat in 3 quiet meetings in their chambers in the palace and had listened to what Frederick had to say. They had not all believed at first. Lord Bryn of the Reach had not believed and had asked hard questions, and Frederick had answered them. And at the end Lord Bryn had stood up and put his hand on the table and said, "Then we ride." Lord Mael of the Storm Coast had been quicker. Lady Ussult of the Vale had been quickest of all. She had lost a husband in those wars, and she had lost 2 brothers, and she had been waiting half her life for someone to give her a name. They rode north together. They did not ride straight to the keep. They rode to the houses of the bannermen who had come to the Varin keep at Castor's call and had ridden home in good faith. They were welcomed at every gate. They sat at every table. Frederick spoke. Sira spoke too when it was needed, and she found to her quiet surprise that men listened to her, not because she was Frederick's wife, though that opened the door, but because she was the one who had stood beside the chair when Castor had been sentenced, and the story had grown in the telling, and they wanted to hear her speak. By the time they came back to the keep, 6 houses stood with them. By the end of the year 12. It took 2 years. 2 years of careful work, letters and meetings, old scrolls pulled out of vaults that had been locked since the border wars, witnesses found, one by one, a steward who had been a boy when his master had been paid in gold by a hooded man, a sellsword who had grown old and tired and willing to talk for a price that was not money. The trail Frederick had thought lost was not lost. It had been buried. They dug it up, piece by piece, and they laid the pieces out. And at the end of 2 years they had a story that even the most skeptical lord could not call a lie. In the 3rd year, they took it to the king. The old king was older now, frailer, and he listened to it from his bed, with his hand standing in the corner of the room, and at the end of it he turned his head and looked at Vortigern, and his weak-tea eyes were not weak at all. "Lord Hand," he said softly, "Your Grace, do you wish to answer these charges?" Vortigern smiled his very small smile. "They are lies, Your Grace." "Ah," the king said, "then I am sorry." He lifted his hand. The guards at the door moved. There was a brief, ugly moment that Sira did not watch. She had asked Frederick before they came that she be allowed to not watch. He had agreed. She kept her eyes on the king's face, and the king kept his eyes on hers, and at one point, very faintly, the old man nodded to her, as if to say, "Thank you." When it was done, Vortigern was led out in chains. He did not look back. He was tried in open court. He was found guilty. He was executed at the foot of the white walls of the capital, and the realm did not weep for him, and the king did not last out the winter, and his heir, a quiet, careful young man who had grown up in Vortigern's shadow, came to Frederick within a month of his crowning and asked, plainly, for his counsel. Frederick gave it. He gave it for the rest of his life. Sira was 23 when their first child was born. A girl. They named her Mara after Frederick's mother, and she had her father's storm-cloud eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and Myra held her first because Sira was too tired and Frederick was crying too hard to be trusted. The wolves of the keep howled when she was born, all of them at once, up and down the valley, a sound that traveled for leagues. A son followed 2 years later, then another daughter. Then, 10 years on, when Sira had thought they were done, a small, loud, red-faced boy who arrived in the middle of a snowstorm, and whom Frederick, dazed and grinning, named Havar after the old king who had given them their proof. The bakery on Mill Lane was kept open. Sira saw to that. She paid a baker to run it, an honest woman with 3 children of her own, and any traveler who came to the door hungry was given bread free of charge, with a small silver coin pressed into their palm for the road. It became a story in the city, the bread of the wolf's wife. People said if you took it kindly, your luck would turn. People said sometimes that they had seen the wolf's wife herself in the shop, in a plain gray dress, kneading the dough on a wooden table, but no one could ever say which day or quite what she had looked like. Sira never said either way. On a cold, bright autumn evening, 12 years after she had given a stranger her last coin, Sira stood on the high terrace of the Varin Keep with her husband at her shoulder and watched the sun go down over the valley. The wolves were running below them, a long silver line, with a smaller, darker shape galloping at the head. Mara, 12 years old, on her first run with the pack, her braids streaming behind her in the wind. Frederick's hand found Sira's. He did not look at her. He was watching their daughter. "Do you ever think," he said, "what would have happened if you had walked past me that day?" "I do not think about it." "No. No, Frederick, I think about what did happen. There is enough in that to fill a life." He smiled. Below them on the valley floor, Mara let out a long, high howl. Vale, old now, white-muzzled, padding along beside her, threw back his head and answered. And then the whole pack joined in, and the sound rolled up the side of the keep and up the stone of the terrace and into the place where Sira was standing, with her husband's hand in hers and the gold of the bond warm in her chest. And it sounded, she thought, like a kingdom. It sounded like home. She had given a stranger a silver coin in the rain. She had been given a world in return. She lifted her face to the wind, and she smiled, and somewhere very far below, in the lengthening shadows of the valley, her daughter ran with the wolves. Thank you for listening. If a story like this one moved you, there is more where it came from: bonus chapters, alternate points of view, and stories you will not find anywhere else, all on the channel's Patreon. The link is in the description. Until next time, be the kind of stranger who stops in the rain. You never know whose life you might be saving, including sometimes your own.